Ms Broad.
Thank you, Acting President. I rise to speak on the State Taxation Acts Amendment Bill 2025. This bill amends various Victorian taxation-related acts, including the Commercial and Industrial Property Tax Reform Act 2024, the Land Tax Act 2005 and the Unclaimed Money Act 2008. It impacts multiple taxation acts regarding taxation administration and compliance, and the bill also institutes a penalty taxation rate for reckless non-compliance, which is arguably a new taxation measure. And that's what this government loves to do. They love to tax, tax and tax. We've had over 60 new or increased taxes since this government came to power. And when I think back, I've been in now for 2.5 years, and I remember early on looking at the interest payments every day being about $15 million every single day. And now we've seen in the recent budget, we are now within a few years heading towards a much higher amount, $29 million every single day, just in interest. And the debt we are heading towards in this state is $194 billion. Now that is extraordinary. So what do we get for it? As David Davis pointed out, we are the highest tax state, but it's good, it would be good to know where the money is going, because at the moment our state is in a huge hole. It's like a vortex. There's lots of money going in to the coffers, lots of new taxes being introduced, but there's certainly not much to show for it. And when you look at our roads, and there's been a lot of news coverage over a long period of time, but our roads are falling apart in regional areas. Certainly the Calder, up to Bendigo, nice and smooth for the most part, but when you deviate off that into other roads across our state, you'll see a very different picture. And we know our health system is under pressure, and when you look at housing, we do have a housing crisis in Victoria, and it's certainly burdened by property taxes. But roads, as I mentioned, there's been a number of media reports. I know my Nationals colleague Kim O'Keefe, a member for Shepparton, has been out with a truck driver actually experiencing how bumpy it is to be, a bruised head, that's right, just experiencing the uneven nature of our roads. And if you've certainly hit any of those potholes, you've probably experienced that absolute thud and that crunch. But we've seen in the news reports that Victoria's roads will continue to deteriorate despite record funding, so-called record funding. The newspapers talk about experts warning not enough work is being done by the Allen government to rehabilitate roads. Data released in performance reports linked to the May budget have revealed that despite a record $976 million in funding, a shockingly low amount of road repairs will be carried out compared to previous years across regional Victoria and outer Melbourne in the year ahead. It goes on to analyse Victoria's road maintenance targets, which show that in 25-26 works in regional areas will dramatically reduce to 2.7 million square metres. Now, this is down 13% from the target of 3.1 million in 2024-25 and down from 9 million square metres of road that was being treated to fix and protect against rain and potholes in regional Victoria in 2022-23. Now, I know my colleague and leader of the Nationals, Danny O'Brien, has pointed out that despite claiming it's spending record amounts on roads, Labor's own budget papers show a shocking 93% reduction next year in patching works and a 13% reduction on road resealing and rehabilitation. So where is the money going? And last year alone, there were approximately 15,000 reports of potholes. That's averaging over 120 defects daily. But yes, as I said before, if you've ever driven on these roads, you will know what I'm talking about. It's not just roads, it's our health system. There is a significant shortage of hospital beds, particularly in regional areas like Mildura and Wodonga, which leads to ambulance ramping. Now, Mildura is now the worst hospital for emergency department waits, and my colleague, Jade Benham—
Thank you, Ms Broad. Mr Batchelor on a point of order.
Just on relevance, whilst the bill state tax bill deals with a number of taxation matters. I'm not sure it deals with potholes or hospitals. So I'd ask the member to come back to the bill.
I'll ask the member to come back to taxation and revenue measures, please.
Okay. Thank you, Acting President. I do believe that state taxation is important. As I was mentioning, it's raising revenue, and where that money is going is very important. But this bill does talk very much about property taxes. Recently, I hosted a forum in Bendigo with Tim McCurdy MP, and we met with local real estate agents to discuss the deepening housing crisis in regional Victoria. As I mentioned before, 60 new or increased taxes, now 30 of these target property, and Labor's policies are pushing rental providers out and driving up the cost for tenants. Now, I've received emails about these issues, and this particular bill does talk about the Land Tax Act. I received a letter from a gentleman in Huntly, and he says, "We are a couple in our mid-70s on a part pension. Due to health reasons, we retired from work 5 years ago." Now, he goes on to say, in the last 3 years, we've had land tax and COVID debt recovery charge applied. First, it was less than $300. Last year, it was increased to over $1,600, and this year, the bill is over $1,700. We could not pay last year's and are on a payment plan with the State Revenue Office. And he goes on to talk about council rates that are adding, along with the new volunteer services levy on both rates charges this year's land tax and COVID debt recovery charge is impossible to pay. Now, this is the pressure that people are under. Now, I also received another email from someone who was telling me about, well, one of the examples why investors are moving away from residential property, and he talks about the costs that you find on a 4-bedroom home in Strathfield, say, and he says rent was $550 per week, has just been listed and relet at $600 per week, and he lists the costs connected. So council rates over $3,200, land tax over $18,600 on that property, insurance over $1,600, the agent's management fee $2,300, the Colburn water fee over $1,000, mandatory electrical inspection over $160, general repairs $1,164, the expenses are over $28,200, and the rent for 24-25 financial year, $28,600. That is just an example of the incredible burden that is being placed on people with property. And yet we see the introduction of the emergency services tax, another new tax. And again, I ask, where is the money going? Because this particular tax is to pay for services that have previously been funded under the state budget. But I received another email from a lady called Carolyn, and she talked about that emergency services tax, and she says it's not just farmers that Victorian taxes are affecting. She was talking about that particular tax. Before this tax was on the table, the new Victorian land tax affected me as a small property owner who struggled all my life to pay for my investment for a good retirement. My land tax went from $9,000 to $28,000 per annum, which I could not afford. I'd owned and lived at the property for 30 years. I'm actually glad now that this tax has come in that I have sold. And then, yeah, she talks about the impact on other people and small investors in a similar boat. But we have seen people protesting against this tax. Certainly that's happened in Bendigo, it's happened on the steps of Parliament. I know on the weekend in Ballarat. The councils have said very clearly they don't want to collect it. No one can afford it. And the impact of the drought has just meant that this has been the most difficult time for people, particularly in regional areas that rely on the land. Now, the damage done by this government is extensive and it will take years to fix. Now, we need a government for the whole of the state, a government that is more equitable, more transparent, and a government that cares about your money and where your money is going and how that money is being spent. We've seen in previous budgets Under this Allen Labor government, only 13% of new infrastructure spending goes to regional areas, yet we have 25% of the population that have chosen to live in regional Victoria. Now, we are less than 70 weeks away from the next state election. We need a change of government and a fresh start.